Dun, dun, dun,
Dun.
dun, dun, dun,
What's up, everybody?
dun, dun, dun,
You're listening to She's Gotta Watch It.
dun, 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 dun. Starring
Maya
dun, 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 dun,
and
Raven. Dun, dun, dun,
a weekly podcast. This is a weekly podcast where we discuss
dun,
the TV shows that we were watching this week. What are there things we're interested in? Or shows you're interested in?
We're
We're going to try to have fun with it and give you our real opinion about what's happening, especially around shows that have to do with race, gender, sexuality, all those things. And even some fun ones that are just shows that we just watch just because. Hopefully you like it.
All right, so
That was really
episode
good.
number 1. Every week I have a new theme song. I'll just improvise.
Yeah, and I'll
some
try to do better.
Mediocre beatboxing.
I'll try to do better on the intro, but that was really good. Good job. Good job.
Thanks. Okay, so episode number 1.
Episode number 1. We've been talking about this for years, and we finally doing it.
Yeah, I think I finally got enraged enough at the TV show that we had to do this.
True. So episode number 1 is going to be about, drum roll please.
Oh, sorry, that wasn't a drum, that was like guitar.
Raising Dion on Netflix. Yay!
Yeah.
Okay. So if you haven't watched Raising Dion yet, it's a show on Netflix about a little boy and his mom who, I guess he has superpowers, and his mom is trying to figure out how do you raise him. And I think what makes this show so interesting is that it centers around a black family who has just lost the father. Thank you. I was gonna be like the husband, but yeah, the father. And so at the same time that the single black mother is trying to figure out how to raise her son, she's now trying to figure out how to raise a black son with superpowers, which I think has a lot of sort of social implications. So that's sort of like the bare bones of this series. We're doing the show assuming that you've already watched the series,
or maybe seen a trailer,
heard
of
something.
it, possibly read the comic it's based off of.
So we're not going to be explaining scenes in depth, and there will be hella spoilers. So if you want to pause this and go watch it and then come back, we say go do that.
Right now, be prepared for some straight criticism and critique.
I mean, technically, isn't it the same thing?
Not always.
Oh, true.
I think that's why when you were in school, they were like, make sure you're giving constructive feedback, constructive criticism. Like they never liked you just to criticize each other's work. It was always
but critique is also constructive criticism.
Right. So criticism, and then I said and critique. So critique is the
here's
how you can make things better. Criticism is just like, this is why this sucks.
But you just said constructive. Okay, we don't need to go into that. Moving on. But yeah, like she said earlier, the show is based off a comic by Dennis Liu. And the comic I don't think the comic wasn't very known until he created a short called Raising Dion. And that really helped propel the comic. And that's going to come up later in our conversation because it's a really big sticking point for us.
But you can pause right now, go to YouTube, look it up, and you will
you
find
should do that.
This live action short that was the promo trailer for the comic that led to inspiring the actual Netflix show.
Yeah. So format is pretty simple. We're each going to sort of talk about what we liked about the show, if anything, and then maybe 1 or 2 things that kind of made us go, meow. So I guess I'll start with just sort of asking you, what did you think about it?
I thought it had a lot of potential.
Don't be like those critics. Come on.
But I didn't like it.
Oh.
I did not like it. I think in the end, after talking to some folks about it, talking to you about it, one of the things I came to the conclusion was that it feels like what happens when you have men in charge of a story about womanhood and motherhood. And I don't mean this to say men can't write like women as characters. I don't think that's a thing. I just think that if there needs to be a critical mass in the writer's room that, you know, can help balance out some of those myths and misperceptions that men might have about women, and that women might have about men. And I don't know if this show reaches that critical mass. To be fair, I don't know everyone who's in that writer's room, but I know that, you know, the original comic was written like by a man, that the two celebs who are like producing this are Jason Ritter and Michael B. Jordan. And so far I know there's at least 3 men who've been involved in the story. And obviously you know, need a broad perspective on what it means to raise a child, you know, what grief looks like. All these things are involved in the show. But I think in terms of what they view that relationship being like from the mom's side is very skewed, and that's what the whole story is supposed to be about. And I think Dennis Liu in the comic does a pretty good job of it. Albeit the comic is limited, it's literally just like a single comic. At least that we were able to find. We couldn't find
so
more
if there's
than,
more out there, let us know.
Yeah, we couldn't find more than one like issue. But you know, it's still like once it came time to expand that story out to something bigger, a lot of things got lost. And what made her as a character, as a mom, you know, important to this child, important to filmography and the world of television and the world of comics, because you don't hear things from the side of the family members when you do superhero stories. You always hear from the superhero's perspective and how hard it is to be a hero, and how their family's just trying to understand them and they're so misunderstood. But sometimes just like, well, sometimes mom is misunderstood, and sometimes, you know, mom is struggling because she's not doesn't have powers, and here she is trying to figure out how to teach her son how to navigate the world, and that parallels her life as a black mom in general, because black people are treated differently in this world to begin with. But black mothers also know that black sons are treated differently than, you know, the mother is. Like, we all face different types of like discrimination, and you know, going forward you have to teach your son things that other parents of other like ethnicities and races don't have to do. So compound that with him having superpowers and being all of 8 years old, and it's like, oh shit. What do you do now?
True story. You can ask me.
Yes. So yeah, what were your initial thoughts?
I think
Where'd this take you?
I think a lot of them parallel with yours, and we've already talked about this so much. People keep asking us about this show, and I think the thing that got me is that I would be okay with this show if this is what the comic gave us, or this is what the short gave us, but it's not.
So what's missing?
I'm about to explain it.
Okay, sorry.
I gave you all that time to talk.
I know. I'm sorry.
I'm processing it. Okay. And so I think what's interesting about the comic and the short is that it truly is from the mother Nicole's perspective. And so like that sense of like voiceover of this is a single black mom telling her story of how she raised her son in one of the most difficult times that I think any family could go through, which is losing a family member and then realizing that another one of your family members has changed, right? And so I think in the comic and in the short, they do something that, as far as I know, is like unheard of, which is to really focus on her experience. And that tone is so distinct and so purposeful that when you watch the Netflix series and television show, it's almost like a punch in the chest, like you realize it's been lost. And I think that's what a lot of us, at least I think a lot of people who saw the short wanted. You wanted that perspective because I think single black moms with children, single black moms with children, what else would you have? Anyway, single black moms
with apples.
With apples. I mean, technically, I guess you could be a single black mom with a dog, because in California, like, everyone thinks their pets
is a baby.
Please don't hate us for that, but like, I just think it's really out there. But
anyway, if one more person says, when I say we're babysitting, goes, animal or actual child, I'm gonna be like, where am I?
Where are we?
Cause
Okay.
yeah, California's weird, y'all.
Anyway, where was I? Yeah, so I think the in the TV show, what doesn't come through is the importance of really highlighting the existence of a single black mother and really giving her the spotlight, right? And I think those types of characters are always secondary characters to sort of black representation on television that's just like super messy and all over the place. And you're like, so where are the like super strong black mothers who aren't just secondary characters, but they are the main through line, right? Like, how do they raise us, right? How do they care for us? How do they protect us? Like, how do they make it so that we understand how to survive in this world? Like, it's not just an episode in a broader TV show, right? It's like it is the show. And I think that's what this TV show was missing, was that sense of care. And you can kind of see it in the sort of like translation from the short to the TV show. It's like something happened between that where they were like, we could just put these characters on TV and bank on the desire for this representation to be there and everything will be okay. But there's other things wrapped up in that, and I think in that storyline, that if you just think that it's okay to put those characters out there, you miss a level of care and attention that for me it's like you see it with other Netflix shows, like they do it with other Netflix shows so well, why can't you do it with this one?
It's true. I think you were the one who read an article that compared Raising Dion to Stranger Things, which is very interesting because actually, the more I think about that comparison, even within that, like you have like a single mother in that story, and you have that like bond with a child that's very close, right? And yeah, so be more kind of like being more specific about like what that looks like is when you see the like a show like Stranger Things or the original trailer for or Raising Dion, like you get that sense of it's us against the world, right? So if something happens to my child, I need to do everything in my power to protect them. I need to prepare them for what's coming next. And then there's also reciprocity from the child to also protect their parent and to be better, so that way together they can live a happy life, right? And you never want to. And I don't like watching shows where the child has to like grow up and be an adult to match their like single parent. Um, I think there's a lot of problems with that because it's not a very good model for a relationship with your child or with your parent. Um, and I mean, that's a thing that some folks know from experience. But at the same time, it's like children should be growing, and children should be expected to grow, and children have an emotional capacity
Yeah.
that Dion and Raising Dion does not have. He does not give any credit for caring for his mom. Like there's times when he understands she's sad that his dad has passed away and she clearly misses dad and he wants her to feel better about that. But when it comes down to him and these powers, he does not give two shits. Like he literally hurts her in the first interaction where she sees like him use his powers, and you think that that would be a catalyst for him to move forward and say, I gotta do better, I can't do things like hurt mom. And yet he puts her in danger time and time again because he doesn't know how to try to be better, but he also isn't really concerned with it. So there usually you get that moral quandary
Or he's concerned too late.
or he's concerned too late. True. So you normally get that moral quandary with any superhero of how do I control my powers because I don't want to hurt anyone who I shouldn't be hurting, and that sort of arc gets totally disconnected from how Dion learns to use his powers.
Yeah. And I think if you can talk about this more, something that you brought up yesterday with the the recording we had that totally just didn't work out. If you can talk a little bit more about maybe how they started it, because you had a really good point about how you can't necessarily start with extreme trauma, specifically because of the way it creates a relationship between a character and the audience, right? Or the character and their backstory and the lack thereof. So if you could talk about that a little bit more, if you can remember, I thought that was like a fantastic point, and I think it also rolls a little bit into like Dion and why it is that this relationship between Dion and Nicole, his mom, just doesn't necessarily feel like it's been thought out, right? Because we keep saying that she actually seems more like a sister than she does a mom.
Yeah, it falls very much into like some Lilo and Stitch moments where you're like, wow, like Dion is Lilo and his powers are Stitch, and like his big sister just can't wrangle him because they're both still like grieving the loss of their parents. um, but in this case, it's not a sibling who's going through the exact same thing. It's a parent, and the parent, like I said, it has to have, or as I kind of implied, also needs to have a greater capacity than what's given in this show to be able to deal with their child, right? So just like Dion needs to have an understanding of, I'm a kid, I'm supposed to learn and get better, so I can be a good grown up someday. Like you also need, mom to be like, I have a son who, even if I can, barely do things for myself right now, I need to find a way to take care of. And they start her off with full on grief. Like, you have no idea how much time has really passed since her husband passed away, but she's still in the sipping wine in the bathtub stage of like, can't handle this. And then they also have her lose her job in like the first episode. You learn that she's like, they give her a backstory like 5 episodes later where you finally learn she used to be a dancer and dance used to be her outlet, but she lost that too. And so she's basically torn down to nothing. She doesn't know who she is anymore. Like, she's lost all the things that made her husband, her, her work, her art. And as you kind of allude to too, now she's losing her child because he's changed. Like he's something totally different. And I think it's impossible to create a character who can go forward and be, like a mentor to their child, to build a new relationship with their child when they themselves are incapable of taking care of themselves. That's really what it is. It's like she can't take care of herself anymore at this point. And it also means it's hard to connect with her because they give her that backstory so late too. So you don't really understand how much she's lost until you're already like halfway through the series. So you start off being like, what's your problem? Like, yes, you lost your husband. We totally get that part. But like, why can't you seem to do anything else right in life in this moment? Because she can't calm Dion down. Like, she doesn't know how to do that. She doesn't know how to comfort him. She doesn't seem to get any respect from him, which is also very at odds with what we think about when we think about black moms. Because like my mom, I had her respect. Like even if I didn't like the things she was telling me or saying, I understood that it all was for a reason. Dion's like, I don't really care what reasons you got. I'm a kid. I'm just gonna do whatever I want. Thanks, bye. He's like a black Caillou. He just doesn't care. And we're supposed to be like, oh, look at this precocious child. No, and yeah, but mom is like at this terrible place. And for a second, I'm gonna take things to another sci-fi for like 10 seconds. Because a couple of years ago, we went to a talk by sci-fi writer Ann Leckie. She's won Hugo Awards for her series, the Imperial Rack series. Great set of books. Starts with Ancillary Justice. It's the first one. Y'all should read it. And in that book, there's a scene that she refers to as a temple scene. And the temple scene, you have two main characters who end up doing something that's just atrocious. That's the best way I can put it. And it's out of necessity, or at least perceived necessity, and it's bad. Yeah. And it's the catalyst for how our protagonist moves forward and makes decisions. And so when she first was putting together this book, she went to her writing group and was like, I want this to be the opening scene because this is where everything changes for the main character. And they were like, hell no. Because the main character's like, closest person, loved one, love interest, however you want to view that particular character, looks like an asshole in this, like, the scene. And so the fact that our main character goes forward trying to sort of uh, make amends for what had happened with that person and with that moment in the temple doesn't mean as much. Yeah. And you look back and be like, why did she even want to be with that person anyway? That person was a terrible person. And it wasn't a good place to start the character. So she had to roll it back and give some backstory first about why those two characters were important before they made this like ridiculous decision that led to bad things happening. And that's how Raising Dion also feels too, is that you don't know these characters at all at first. In the comic books, you get a backstory. You get how Mark, the husband, and how Nicole met. Um, you learn a little bit about like why they were attracted to each other and what their life was like before Dion.
And it's more solid than saying, "Oh, we met in college." The end.
Yes, like they they just kind of just blew the whole backstory thing. I think, yeah, another good example is her sister. Like suddenly she's in a relationship with a woman out of nowhere, that's intentionally secret apparently. And in the same episode, you find out that they're together. They break up, and you don't even care because you're like,
and it feels a little like
it's rushed,
queer baiting to be like, look, we had a queer character in it. Okay, bye.
And she's already heartbroken.
Okay,
and
bye.
You don't care. And you should
Did
always,
I mention okay, bye?
Yeah, like you should always care about those kind of things when it comes to, these figurative, these important characters. Like,
part of me is like, I don't necessarily need to care about it. I just want it to be done in a way that doesn't feel like it's pandering to me. Like I think that's the thing that got me, and I think that's why I keep saying, and that's about the thing about writing with care, because it seems like everything shifted halfway through them writing the series, right? Because all the characters just seem to make a turn without any real hint at that progression. So all of a sudden, you have sort of Pat, who's the supportive best friend of Mark, the husband who has died, who's like with Nicole and with Dion, and is trying to help them through this moment. And it seemed like initially they just wrote him as the comforting best friend, right? That could have tipped over into love interest if they wanted to, could have not. They kept the door open, and then they just swung it open, blew off the door hinges. And then he became like this really like misogynistic, literally the embodiment of toxic masculinity in terms of, what was he called?
The Crooked Man.
The Crooked Man.
So he winds up being the villain.
Which is also interesting to think about the Cricket Man, because it also makes it seem as if like, well, not all men are like this, just the Cricket Mans are, like, like it's just this weirdest thing. But I think they just, again, they lost a really important opportunity to produce a different type of model of what maleness could be in these situations, right? And I think what's really interesting about this is that instead of thinking about, okay, we want to talk about toxic masculinity, like we just had to take it all the way to the extreme,
and it's so unnecessary,
versus being like, men can be friends too with women in these situations. Like, you don't always have to expect something. The thing you should want to cultivate, again, not expect, but cultivate, is friendship. And that's what they had. And then it felt like they just obliterated that because they saw a moment to talk about like toxic masculinity, and then it was like, cool trope, let's go. And it kind of drained everything that was already there, because again, it felt like they went from 0 to 60, and as an audience you're like, oh, okay, I guess that happened.
Yeah,
cop out.
And that's kind of where I think I really got that feel, that moment where I really got that feel of like, oh, there had to be a man's hand in this, because it feels like mansplaining of like, how this works and how bad it
and
is.
Even I don't know, I feel like even if there isn't, I think there's this trend of just hitting things straight on the nose.
Yeah.
Which means that you don't give the audience enough credit in their ability to like read the signs and symbols that are already in the storyline. And I think that's why the original comic for me was so interesting, because the way they built it up, it felt like this really cool black love story that turned supernatural and sci-fi in the end. Because if y'all recall, in the TV show, the cabin doesn't really matter. The cabin is like this place that we come back to that I mean, honestly, if they had taken out the cabin scenes, I don't really think it would have mattered. They could have just done whatever and pulled those moments out and put them into other places in the universe. But I think in the comic, the cabin is so central because it's the place that I think they go to on their first anniversary. It's the place where Mark first gets his power. He's only there with Nicole, but she doesn't know yet. And it sets off this whole series of presumed events because, again, there's only one issue, so we don't really know what's happening. But this is a place where, and she also comes back to train Dion, right? And so this becomes the place where um, she embodies that sort of caretaker, like that extreme caretaker mode. That's like, your dad's dead. Maybe somewhere in the comic they had her find out that Mark had powers, but now she has to figure out what to do with Dion. And they go to the only place that like no one really knows about, where they're both safe, where they can figure out what to do with this. And again, going back to your point, it's not like he's not a kid. He's still a kid. She's like, cool, you master this ability, you can make popcorn with it, right? It's like teaching him in all these ways that will still excite him and want and allow him to figure out like what it means to hone his power. It still allows him to be a little mischievous. So at one point he's invisible watching his iPad and she's like, stop doing that.
And he's like counting cookies, right? Pulling them out the cookie jar, and she's like, don't eat those.
Right, he's still doing all these sort of kid like mischievous things, but she's still parenting him. And I think it's because in the comic enough time has sort of lapsed between Mark's death and her finding out that like Dion has powers, that she's able to do this almost in memory of him, right? Not trying to hold all these things together, because as much as we sort of say that like Black moms are superheroes and they're super because they are, they shouldn't have to be. Like, you shouldn't have to hold all these things at once and still be expected to like raise your properly, quote unquote, raise your child, right? Responsibly raise your child. Like, where's the relief? Like, everyone needs a relief, everyone needs a support system at some point. And I think that's why the whole arc with Pat was so frustrating. And the whole arc with like his sister was like frustrating. And with the cabin, like,
because they lost their safe space. Yeah, like every superhero, and I said this before, every superhero needs a fortress of solitude. They need a bat cave, and this is supposed to be that space for them, and they don't get that. And I think that really speaks to your point about like having some sort of reprieve, about having some sort of healing that is continuous and there. And throughout this entire the like TV version, you don't get that because they turn immediately, the cabin turns into a bad place for them, where in the comics they're, you know, learning and having fun and still playing. In the TV show, like there's immediately disaster when Dion can't control his powers on the lake, and he literally almost kills himself. And then the Crooked Man shows up, but they don't know the Crooked Man is there. And they try to hide there later on in the series, and the Crooked Man shows up again. And there's never a safe place that they can call home. Even the place they moved into in the show, that opens up with them in like a new apartment after they left their old neighborhood. Like, everything. Dion doesn't have any friends. Yeah. And there's all these missed opportunities for Nicole to get the help she needs from those around her. Like, she and her sister butt heads throughout the whole series until the very end. She and Pat butt heads throughout it because at first she's like, I don't want to get too close to this person. You were my husband's person, not mine. And then later on they get closer, only for him to try to be the villain. The only person who's really consistent for her is her neighbor Tessa, who, in my opinion, is the Black mom who should have been Dion's mom. She embodies in just her like few scenes like all the things that I think about that make me have so much respect and reverence for Black moms. Like, she is funny, she's smart, she's witty. She also knows that she needs to keep her child on some sort of proverbial leash, because otherwise he'll go and do stupid things. He's a teenager. But she still gets some freedom to like learn and grow and express himself, because he still gets to hang out with his friends, and like he's learning how to dance and like cool stuff like that.
I think what's interesting is just putting Nicole and Tessa together, right, as one character, because you still want the like vulnerability You don't want this weird, like, archetypal strong black woman who never has emotions and who can always just power through whatever. She's just like comedic relief. But it's like putting those two things together. Why is that so hard? Right? It's like giving a character depth. And I think that's the thing that was lacking in this. And it's weird because I read a lot of like criticism from online magazines about this series, and I don't know if this is just a convention to be polite, but everyone was like, it's okay. It wasn't written well, but you know, it was adorable. It was cute. It wasn't adorable.
Someone was like, it's like Netflix's era of mediocre, just okay television.
Just okay television.
Like, you can't knock it because it's not the worst, but you also don't love it because it's not the best.
And I think the call not to demand better, but just to wait to see what Netflix does is not okay, because I think within the I guess like history of black people on television, to just wait for a large network, or in our case like streaming company, to do right by us makes no damn sense, because we know they don't. Right? And so there's just sort of this taken for grantedness, like, I guess this is just what they could do, it's okay.
And it's sort of like, you're gonna watch it for the culture, or you're a white progressive and you're gonna watch it because it's black people and you want to support them,
right?
Like,
and I think for folks who, you're like, but I watch sci-fi all the time, I read it all the time, I know it can be better, I know people have done better things.
Yeah.
Don't tell me you couldn't have done better.
Color.
Yeah, Fast Color.
Great movie.
And so I think there's just this moment where, even though it has a lot of potential and I want to be excited about it, in the back of my head I keep going, but why did it turn out this way? When the original source material, and that's my hang up, so if you keep hearing me talk about it, it's because I really hung up on this, is that the original source material was so good. If you take that as the beginning of the series, literally just copy and paste it into the beginning of the series, and then move from there, I think you get a completely different show. And it's something that I think folks would, I'm sorry, I keep saying folks, me, maybe you, I don't really know, would have appreciated more than them just being like, we took the general concept and then did whatever we want with it. I mean, it's kind of like you were saying yesterday about when they take books and they turn them into movies, and then we all like, what the fuck just happened? Yeah. Hashtag The Giver. That was just painful.
Or Hunger Games, or basically any book turned into a movie.
So I think most of our critique basically is just, y'all can do better. And when you already have really good source material, why not just migrate that over? Like, you're gonna create the show anyway, y'all. So what's going on?
Yeah, it's true. And I don't know if I even want to watch the next season.
Oh, I'm gonna watch the next season. I'm gonna watch it because I watch everything. So you gotta watch it.
Yeah, okay, we'll watch it, and I will continue to pause every 5 minutes like I did during season 1, and continue to critique it, and, you know, dog it out for not being for being neither a good black television show nor a good superhero television show, in my opinion.
Dog it out.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think that was our first episode.
That was it. So y'all can be mad, be big mad, be little mad.
You just let us know what you thought about it yourself. I mean, honestly, I think if you like it, you like it. This isn't about us telling you what to think. It's just about us sharing our opinions, and you can like them or you can not like them, or you can modify them, you know? So you can catch us on Instagram at She's Gotta Watch It. Hopefully that will be the Instagram, because I'm about to make it right now.
Oh, also, just quick shout out. There's one thing I actually like about that show. It's character Esperanza.
Yes, Esperanza.
So shout out to whoever was the primary writer for that character, to the actress. She was a great little girl. If I'm gonna keep watching the show, it's for her. So I just wanted to say I didn't hate everything.
True story.
On the record.
There's some things we like. We didn't really get to it because this is already like 30 minutes long, and we're trying to keep everything below like 40.
But yeah, before y'all hit us up being like, but what about Esperanza? We loved Esperanza, so
we did.
Leave us alone for that one.
Yeah, and if you have questions, leave them in the comments. We'll answer them. You know, we'll do the thing. We'll interact with y'all because guess what? We can do that. It's 21st century.
There's two of us.
And there's two of us.
We're she's who gotta watch it.
Okay. Peace.
Peace.
You're not gonna do an outro song?
Oh, okay. Dun, 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 dun,
you gotta watch it.
Dun, 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 dun,
you gotta watch it.
Dun, 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 dun,
every Sunday.
Dun, dun, dun,
5 p.m. Tune in.